The Edmonton Oilers may be trailing 1-0 in their first round series to the Los Angeles Kings, but this series is far over on today's edition of Locked On Oilers.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Zararis. One full season in the books as host of Locked On Oilers, my third season with the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank everyone that's making Locked On Oilers their first listen of the day. Locked On Oilers, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's show, we're going to walk through some big picture ideas through the early stage of this series. We're going to talk about why it's important that the Oilers get their game reps up and try and find some consistency in the lines and pairs they would like to run. We're going to pivot to talking about why the Oilers special teams are so important. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the ether. We're going to talk about the vibes and the energy of this series through one game. So to start out, we all understand that the Oilers are working from a disadvantageous position. You think about the man games they've lost, especially in the span of the last month. I think we'd be remiss to have the conversation about this team at large without addressing the fact that Mattias Ekholm, their best defensive defenseman, isn't going to play in this first round series and is questionable for even the second round should the Oilers advance. And framing the conversation around that, some people are going to say, well, Nick, you're making excuses. Teams lose good players all the time. And you're right. Every team will deal with injuries. That's a reality of the playoffs. The Stars are missing Miro Heiskanen right now, who is amongst the best defensemen in the world. So that absence is absolutely going to be felt there. And it's incumbent upon you as guys on the team to be able to play long enough that an injured guy can get back in the mix, that you play long enough and you play well enough that Ekholm can be a factor come the second round or maybe a conference final should the Oilers be so fortunate. But in terms of game one, that first 40 minutes was, I don't want to say pulling teeth because that feels a little disingenuous. It was more anxiety filled than actively painful. You know, I said on the show yesterday, right after the game, I found myself sitting on my hands a lot, biting on my lip, biting on my hand, and just perpetual state of discomfort. You know, it's like the DMV, but if it was hell, like if you were in the waiting room to go to hell and it just so happened to be a DMV, that's what that felt like. The Oilers were in their own zone for extended periods of time. They were hemmed in. They were struggling to break out. They were only playing 5 defensemen for pretty much the entire game. Josh Brown played less than 6 minutes in this contest, and it's very ironic. Some of those minutes came on the penalty kill, the most important minutes of the game, but for the Oilers, they looked like a team whose best players hadn't played with each other in a while. I thought Leon took a good period and a half to get up to game speed. He went off sides quite a few times during the early stages of this game. I want to give credit where it's due. Some of that is simply the Kings playing good defense. When you ride that high line in the defensive zone and force guys to make a decision maybe half a beat faster than they want to, you're going to be able to draw guys off sides. And the Kings did a really good job defensively as far as making the Oilers uncomfortable, at least for the first 40 some odd minutes of this game. But I think as this series goes along and as guys start to shake off the rust, certain players are going to start to look their part more. I think Connor looked his part. You know, he played the last 2 games of the regular season. I don't think it's a coincidence he looked pretty sharp. I think Leon, as the series goes along, I think as the game went along, he definitely started to get better. Ditto for Jake Wallman, who hasn't played in a while, took a couple of rough penalties, and we'll talk about the penalties and the refereeing in our second segment, so I don't want to get ahead of myself there. But Wallman, definitely a little juiced up, being that he hadn't played. I think about him tackling someone after a scrum to make sure they didn't get a rebound opportunity on Stuart Skinner. I think about the cross-check he threw on Philip Deneau that unfortunately drew a penalty, and the Kings ended up scoring on that power play resulting from that penalty. But he needed to get up to speed. I don't think Trent Frederic looks right, and I hate to be a Debbie Downer. I've long awaited Trent Frederic to actually get a proper debut as an Oiler, because I think he's an interesting skill set, and I do think he brings something the Oilers don't have a whole lot of. I think his energy and his forechecking in particular stand out as far as traits the Oilers don't have a whole lot of in their lineup right now, but he doesn't look right. He looked like he had a hard time pivoting, changing direction, changing speed, and that might be a case of a player trying to get it out. And you want to give kudos for the resilience, for the character, for wanting to endure that discomfort. But at the same time, if you're not going to be a material positive in the lineup, you got to have the honest conversation if you're Chris Knobloch, whether or not you can afford to play Trent Frederic. And the ironic thing is, Trent Frederic was in the Oilers' most commonly used 5-on-5 line in game number 1. Him, Jeff Skinner, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, second most commonly used line at 5-on-5. What was surprising to me when I looked on Natural Stat Trick today when I was putting together my notes for the show, the Oilers' most commonly used line in game number 1 at 5-on-5 was actually their fourth line. It was Adam Henrique, Matthias Janmark, and Corey Perry. And you might say, well, Nick, how is that possible? Well, the Oilers played 9 different forward combinations who registered at least 2 shifts together. So being that Chris Knobloch was constantly cycling through, churning through combinations, trying to find anything to get the game going, it's not a surprise things were disjointed. It's not a surprise the Oilers struggled to find any real consistency until they settled into what you could call a hero line and everyone else down the backstretch of this game as they were trying to tie it up. And I do think it's a cause for concern that the Oilers rode their top guys so aggressively in a first game. And obviously, it's incumbent upon you as a coach to do that. It's why you pull the goalie down 2 or 3 in the playoffs, because you don't have time for things to sort themselves out. You can't waste an opportunity to get back in a game. And the Oilers didn't until they did. But that's not the point I was trying to make there. Yes, it would have been bad if Chris Knobloch had simply kept the lines as they were and the Oilers were going through the motions. I did say on yesterday's show, and I want to be ideologically consistent, I do think it would have helped the Oilers if Knobloch had settled a little bit earlier on in the game, because to go through that many different permutations, it's hard for a player to get a feel for the game when they're constantly being juggled who they're playing with. Hockey is such an intuitive and a feel-based sport that if you're constantly getting changed who you're playing with, or you're getting your regular shifts, it's hard to get the timing down. It's not quite like baseball where, you can pop into the cage in between your at-bats when you're in the dugout to get your timing down before your next at-bat. Hockey, you're sitting on the bench waiting to hear your name called or your line called, and you got to go back out there and you got to try and find something to get going. And you don't have the luxury of taking that first pitch just to get your timing right. When you go out there, you got to be ready to make an impact in whatever way you can. And I do think the Oilers, as this game went along, they found their confidence. They started to look something like resembling the good version of what the Oilers can be. But their defensive woes, their goaltending, were both causes for concern in this game. You have a goalie give up almost 3 full goals above expected. That's going to be hard for any team to overcome, let alone a team that's playing 5 defensemen and has really struggled at times, especially over the last month or so on special teams. And the Oilers' penalty kill over the last month has been pretty good, and we're going to talk about special teams in a minute. So I don't want to spoil it. We're going to take our first break of today's show. When we come back, we are going to tackle why special teams are going to be so crucial in this series on today's edition of Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. NBA and NHL playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action, because right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. FanDuel makes betting so easy. You can bet on teams or individual player props, from 3-pointers to steals to goals to assists to saves. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game starts, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Do not miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers ahead of Oilers Kings Game 2. And Game 1, from a vibes perspective, an energy perspective, a flow perspective, was definitely an outlier amongst the games we've seen so far in the first round. For a team to be trailing 4-1 and storm all the way back to tie, only to lose 30 seconds later, it's going to be really hard to draw definitive conclusions away from that game. Because effectively, you're talking about multiple games. You're talking about a blowout. You're talking about a team building a lead. And then you're talking about one team storming back and the other team blowing a multi-goal lead. And when you have so many different game states within a single game, you're going to end up tricking yourself a little bit. And it's why I said on yesterday's show, and the everydayers heard me say it, Game 1 is what you made of it. If you want to look at it glass half full, the Oilers are so good. They were down 4-1 going into the third period, and they tied the game and they had a chance to win. If you want to look at it from a glass half empty perspective, they got off to a terrible start. Their defense was atrocious, just actively bad. And their great players played as great as they possibly could, and it wasn't enough. And they let a team beat them on a stinky goal that Stuart Skinner never saw, on a night where Stuart Skinner just didn't find one. And this is one of those nights where Stuart Skinner needed to be a guy. The Oilers did not ask him to do a whole lot in this game. The Kings, for as good as I felt that the Kings played, the goals they actually scored, by and large, aren't incredible. You know, like I said, almost 3 full goals saved above expected, almost 3 full goals more than you would expect an average goalie to concede in the situation Skinner did last night. And as we talk about this series, and I said this on the preview with Eddie Garcia, and I'll say it again now, at 5-on-5, the Kings are arguably a better team. And I know that's a little crazy when you look at the metrics, especially for the regular season, where the Oilers graded out extremely favorably in terms of high danger chances and expected goals. The problem is their shooting percentage. The problem is that the Oilers became a bit of a volume offense. And some of those numbers are a bit out of whack because of the McDavid and Draisaitl injuries, because of the fact that the Oilers were trailing in so many games down the second half of this season. And because of that, teams are more inclined to give them those low-quality chances. You accumulate enough of those low-quality chances, it looks pretty good on the expected goals ledger. And yeah, they did generate a ton of high-danger chances, but it doesn't really matter if you don't convert them. And that's where we get to special teams and why, especially based on Game 1, they're going to be essential. And we know the Oilers are a special teams dependent team. This is a team that made it to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final last year with a +1 goal differential at 5-on-5. So you think about how much of a swing that is in terms of penalty kill and power play to sustain a team to go that deep in the postseason. But Game 1, 7 penalties overall, 5 to the Oilers, 2 for the Kings. And I'll throw some of you Oiler fans a bone who want me to complain about the officiating. Yes, it was not good. The Zach Hyman illegal check to the head, that's not a penalty. That's ridiculous. Jake Wallman did not delay of game. That puck hit off the glass. If you watch the replay I saw on Twitter last night, you can see the mark the puck leaves on the glass when it hits the glass. And then the subsequent bench minor you get for an unsuccessful challenge doesn't happen if the referees get the initial call on the Wallman play correct. I just want consistency, and officiating discourse is insufferable. Nobody benefits from it. The NHL is not going to change its procedures, but it is a part of the story. And when you have 7 power plays in a game and you only get 2 and the other team gets 5, I think you have a little bit of a reason to be upset. And I think the Oilers know that if they're going to win this series, they're going to need their power play to step up. And it went 0 for 2 in Game 1. It scored as one was expiring. And to get where the Oilers are going to want to go, they're going to need their power play to be 30%, 35%. And that's in stark contrast to what it was. If you go and look Over the final 20 regular season games this year, the Oilers power play went to 10 for 61, so 16.3%, which would be amongst the worst in the entire NHL over the course of a full season. Of course, you do have to add the context that the Oilers were missing its best players. You're missing a McDavid, you're missing a Draisaitl. And for the season, if you were to have a 16.3 power play, that would have put you at 27th. You would be only better than Anaheim, the Islanders, the Flyers, and the Bruins, and you would be slightly worse than the Rangers. And when your 5-on-5 offense is the way it is, where it's very top heavy and the bottom half of your lineup just doesn't play a whole lot. And when it does, there are moments, like I said, Adam Henrique, Janmark, and Corey Perry had an effective game for a fourth line. They won the scoring chance battle. The shots for and against were minuscule. The goals for and against, there was 0. They had a slight edge in expected goals, but that's what you want from your fourth line. And if we're being frank, on paper, Adam Henrique is probably overqualified for a fourth line center role. I think Corey Perry, based on the goal scoring he's had this year, is probably overqualified for that spot. Yeah, Mark is a fourth liner, but he's played in the Oilers' top 9 a ton this year because Chris Knobloch trusts him. But if the Oilers are going to get to where they want to go, they're going to need their power play to find that next gear. And for me, the Oilers' power play begins and it ends, and this might shock you, with the Evan Bouchard one-timer. The Evan Bouchard one-timer needs to be the focal point. And yes, Connor can do his jitterbug. He can get it between the circles. He can get it to Hyman on the back door. But against the Kings team that is so militantly disciplined about controlling that center lane of the ice and keeping you to the outside. I mean, you go back and you watch the sequences for McDavid setting up all 4 goals and then one case scoring the 1 goal. They were byproducts of him just dragging guys. The Kings are grabbing him, trying to turn him, grabbing his stick, and he bowls through. And you can't reasonably expect him to do that every single play. And if you have that man advantage and you have the big shot up at the point, that's going to bring attention in that center lane. And if Bouchard keeps whipping those big shots, and it's a really fine line to walk. I know, and we all know, frankly, that Bush has had a hard time with getting his shot blocked this year. He had a lower rate of scoring chances end up being shots on goal this year than he has the last few seasons. And some of that is just teams are more in tune with his ability and they understand his tendencies a little bit more. And they know there's an opportunity there for a counterattack where if you block his shot, it'll go back the other way. And he's not the greatest of skater. So if you get him skating backwards, you have an opportunity to go back the other way. And I want to see the Oilers find ways to get whoever that 5th guy is on the power play more looks, whether that's Nuge, whether that's Corey Perry, whoever it is. The Oilers need to find a way to get more players involved, because if this is just Connor skating in circles looking for the Leon one-timer or the Bush one-timer, defenses are going to cue in on that and they're going to leave whoever the other opportunities are open. It's why the Oilers power play has worked so well in years past, is that defenses cue in on McDavid and cue in on Leon, and that opens up that backdoor space for Hyman or for Nuge or for the Bush point shot. And if the Oilers are going to do what we want them to, it is essential they get their power play going. I think the penalty kill will be better in game 2. I think Josh Brown almost certainly will draw out, unless the Oilers want to go with 11-7, which I don't really see an argument for based on what went right and what went wrong in game 1. But we're going to take our second and final break of today's edition of Locked On Oilers. And when we come back, we are going to talk a whole lot of vibes. Be right back. Are you looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily nutritional value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep feeling fuller for longer. Personally, I am a big fan of the no-shell variety. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days, whether I'm here at my desk working on the show, doing research, or I just need a quick protein boost to hit my macros for the day. They're a great go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that old school satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein that provides all 9 essential amino acids. Get snackin' and get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Thank you to everyone who is hanging out on this Wednesday edition of Locked On Oilers as we navigate the first round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And when you go through a whirlwind of a game one like that, it can kind of feel like a life experience. There's a good chance I'll be somewhere 5-10 years from now at a social gathering or at a work event, and I'll bring up that game one of the first round of the 2025 NHL playoffs because it was insane. Again, I showed you my notes that I took on my iPad during the course of the game on yesterday's show. The one question I had going into the third period was, can the Oilers make this competitive? I didn't expect them to actually have a real chance of winning the game. I just wanted to see them make some progress towards the next game. You know, the way I was looking at that third period was effectively the second half of a preseason football game where you're just trying things, you're experimenting, you're putting guys who aren't comfortable at positions and you're trying to get them game reps. That's what I was looking at that third period of the game as yesterday. I wanted to see what lines and what pairs Chris Knobloch ended up settling on. I wanted to see who was going to get their game going. And ultimately, of course, Connor, by virtue of his brilliance, dragged them by the neck into the fight. And as much as people want to talk about Nathan MacKinnon, when things are dicey and you put 97 in a situation where it's him or the other guy, I wish you a lot of luck because he is going to do everything physically possible. And he is good for one of those jitterbug moves to the middle where he just dekes at as fast a humanly pace as he can. And because he's deking so quickly, he has the goalie on edge because he doesn't know if it's going to be a quick release. He doesn't know if he needs to play the pass. And that's really what makes that jitterbug move of McDavid's so lethal, is because he's stick handling so fast and his release is deceptive, the goalie needs to be on top of that. And by virtue of the goalie being so prioritized with McDavid driving the net, that is going to leave backdoor plays open. Make as much fun. I know there are people who make fun of Zach Hyman for scoring all those goals last year and so many of them being backdoor tap-ins. Let me see you stand in front of the net getting cross-checked by the other team's penalty killers and big defensemen who are trying to clear the crease, because that's not an easy way to make a living. There are a lot easier ways in the NHL to make a living than getting cross-checked in the lumbar spine and standing in front of the net in hopes the best player in the world can get you the puck. And your hope, and yes, I'm already talking about hope, your hope for game two is the rust is off now. It took you 2 periods to get going, and we know the Oilers are a second period team. They have one of the best goal splits of any team in the entire league in the second period. They lost third periods by 1 goal, and then they won overtime by like 8, and they lost the first period pretty decisively. And they're a team that gets going as the game gets going. And they're a feel team. And if you're going to be a feel and environment team, you need to find a way to manufacture your environment. And I tweeted it during the game. I said it on yesterday's show. I'm going to say it again now. It's in my notes on my iPad. You need more shifts that are just zone time. You need to try and bring the temperature of this game down and get your guys in positions where they can make plays. And that means cycle. That means winning board battles. That means high to low. That means redirects, deflections, ugly goals. Because when you try and attack the zone with speed and the Kings are playing such a high line, they're going to force you into turnovers right as you enter the zone. And that's when you're at your most sensitive, because everybody is going full speed to gain the offensive zone, to have layers of an offensive attack where you try and attack in waves. You have a first wave, second wave, and that first guy in with the puck is going to be followed in by trailers. And the trailers start to leak out. They go wide. They cut in based on what the defense is giving them. And because the Kings play such a high defensive line, it forces you to move that puck before you want to. And that leads to the blind drop pass behind you. That leads to the blind pass to the middle. And it leads to low quality scoring chances. I think about that one shorthanded opportunity Darnell Nurse had in the third period where he was driving the net and he took a pretty mediocre shot from between the circles on a puck that didn't get elevated off the ice when he had a player to his right driving the net. And look, nitpicking in Monday morning quarterback individual decisions in hockey is especially dumb because it's not like football where plays have designated progressions for 1, 2, 3 for the quarterback to go through. But you want to form good habits. And that's the key to me here. Are the Oilers going to be able to take lessons away from game number 1? Are they going to be able to apply those lessons to playing better hockey? And how much better can they feasibly be? And look, I think the Oilers are capable of playing with anyone in the NHL because of their high-end talent. Do they have depth issues? Absolutely. I think you saw it in the way Chris Knoblauch allocated minutes, especially down the backstretch of that third period. You go and look at the box scores for time on ice, and you sort by time on ice. Once you get past Corey Perry, Emberson, 13 minutes, Arvidsson, 12:57, Connor Brown, 12:42, Henrique, 11:52, Podkolzin, 11:17, Jeff Skinner, 10:12, Janmark, 10:49, Trent Frederick, 9:11, and then Josh Brown, 4:54. You can't run a bench like that for 4 rounds. It's just not sustainable. And some of that was because the Oilers were down multiple goals. So you're double shifting guys. You're trying to get offense by any means necessary. And that's what you're supposed to do. Like we said before, you can't afford to punt on the third period of a game because if you backdoor your way back in, you may make that other team sweat. And that's what the Oilers did. And that's why sitting here today, it's even more frustrating than it was last night. This was a winnable hockey game in the playoffs. The other team, the Kings, they wilted. They were shook. McDavid had them quaking in their boots, and then they give up the stinker of all stinkers to lose the game. It's agonizing. I finished, by the time I finished uploading everything, the show to the different platforms we have to upload it to, it was like 3 a.m. And I stared at my ceiling for a good 10 to 15 minutes in just pure frustration that they wasted such a great performance from Connor. And look, the Kings are a good hockey team. I would dare to say this is the best permutation of the Kings, probably in more than a decade at this point. And the Oilers are going to need to adapt. They're going to need to play better hockey, and they are capable of it. But we've also been saying that for the entirety of the regular season. It is one thing to be capable. It is another thing to take action. That will do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much to everyone who made today's show their first listen of the day. Before we get out of here, if you could be so kind, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube to join in the fun of the NHL playoffs. And speaking of the NHL playoffs, go check out Locked On NHL Game Night, breaking down the games as soon as the final game of the night goes live with the local expertise of Locked On. I will see you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.